important to express our appreciation of just being stewards of the land. That our land was first inhabited by the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples. And we are just caretaking the land of 21 acres while we are here on Earth and have the opportunity to do so. So I am your support today. I will probably have my video on and off alternating. I've got a couple of things, wonderful things that are happening as we support our farm and farm market that are essential businesses. And I just feel honored to be with you all. It's been an absolutely intense week, an intense time. And a bit of me hopes that this intensity continues, because that's what's needed for a real change to happen. And all of us at 21 Acres are working on trying to get right with that and feeling okay with this intensity, and trying to determine how best to contribute to the work in a better way than we have in the past. And I'm honored to work with Dr. Sarah Sue Myers, who is your educator for the day. And I feel my heart is going to you, Sarah Sue, up and down the I-5 corridor and sending you lots of love. And thank you for making this happen. So thank you. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Robin. And I just also want to take a moment to acknowledge the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe, as they are the original owners and stewards of the lands that I am on up here in the Bellingham area. And I just want to thank you for sharing the introduction you did, Robin. You know, this has been a very big and powerful week. That was preceded by 2.5 months of a worldwide pandemic where we have had to stay home and practice safety measures that we have never imagined before. And living in a space of uncertainty and fear and paranoia for some. I think we've all felt it on some level. Devastating revealing of injustice and inequality in this country due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There's been a lot of loss of jobs, of health, of freedom, of lives because of this. And now here we are this week. And I thought a lot about this. I've been reflecting on this deeply, of what herbs are calling out to be talked about today. I'm currently in what feels like an abandoned school garden. Here we are, the school that's been closed for well over 2 months now. I see neighborhood kids occasionally here, but I mean, yeah, look, there's just all these strawberries that are ripening on the vines, and I just can't believe that there's this many strawberries that got to this ripeness in a school garden and they're not picked. I mean, goodness gracious, there's rhubarb in the corner, which, goodness gracious, I couldn't think of a better duo in the kitchen, strawberry and rhubarb. We have some volunteer, I don't know if it's volunteer or not, but it's Sweet Annie, which I'm surprised would be in a school garden. But as I was walking around, looking around, it's like, well, what plants are really calling out? These calendulas. They're so bright and vibrant. And I know they want to be talked about, but I didn't get the sense that it was just quite yet. But then this little neighbor popped out to me. Here we go. So has a blue flower that's shaped like a star. And when I touch it, it's hairy. I wouldn't say sharp. It's not, doesn't have that. Yes, Allison, it's borage. You got it. Here's a few other ones in the bed that are just starting to peek up. They don't have the stalk coming up through the middle that brings out all the beautiful flowering bodies, the seeds. These ones are just little volunteers coming up, but oh, this place is gonna be beautiful when they do. The leaves are kind of fairly smooth on the edges aside from their hairiness. They look a little wrinkled. That's kind of part of their characteristic. And then I don't want to take a sample from these little guys because they're just starting out. But I do want to take a little sample from this. And one of my favorite things to do to get to know herbs is using other senses besides sight. And of course, I'm only doing this because I know about the plant, but the taste of borage, it's kind of slimy and mucilaginous. There's a bit of a crunch to it. And actually that texture, that taste, and the crunch reminds me a lot of cucumber, which I've read in descriptions about it too, as a cucumber type taste to it. And it has very cooling properties. Borage leaf has traditionally been used in a lot of different culinary cuisines, especially, I am not completely accurate on this, but I know like French cuisine has integrated borage leaves into culinary creations and cooking, as well as the flowers. The flowers are a little bit more widespread, also edible. That one was on the ground, with just 2 flowers here. I don't really want to disrupt it and take away this beauty and what this plant worked so hard to put out. So there has been a history of culinary use, and I do want to just speak about the safety of the plant right away, because there has been, there's a compound found in borage leaf, in the borage plant, that is called pyrrolizidine alkaloids. I like using acronyms, so we can just call it PA for now. And that plant, or that constituent, has been isolated and researched. And in these high concentrated doses of PAs present, they have found that there can be liver toxicity and damage. And of course, as a result of these studies, the take-home message in the conventional science community is any plant with this constituent is deemed not safe. However, this plant has been used for centuries and ages and has been integrated into culinary cooking. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that that constituent is in there, and that taken regularly at consistently moderate to high doses could potentially put you at risk of having too many PAs enter into the body system. However, using this plant in an acute setting or in small, low doses, my personal medical opinion, based on the research, based on clinical observation, and based on what my teachers and mentors have taught me, is that it's safe. Another example of how the flowers are used, and I'll zoom in on those flowers again, is that they are often found in different salad greens. One way that I really have enjoyed seeing them is integrated into baking. More of the decoration of the baking. So they can often be covered with like a nice sugar glaze or candied borage flowers, and then put on different like cakes and pastries. They are edible, and they taste a little bit like that cucumber taste. And what I would consider almost like a creaminess to them. And what I have learned is that one of the actions of the borage plant, which the Latin name for borage is Borrego officinalis. But one of the uses, medicinal actions of borage, is that it can be a really great support for the adrenal glands, the adrenal system. So the adrenal glands are responsible, they're part of the endocrine or the hormone system in the body, and responsible for stress response. They also help with regulating blood pressure and blood sugar and sex hormones. Cortisol is released from the adrenal glands, as well as epinephrine, or also known as adrenaline. And they are responsible for helping us get physiologically set for a fight or flight response, which is that sympathetic nervous system response. When we are facing a stressor, there is a huge series and cascade path of multiple pathways, all organs involved, of how one responds to stress. An example would be an increase in heart rate, increase in respiratory rate, increase in blood flow to skeletal muscle, heart, and lungs. And then also that's going to take away those blood supplies from things like the digestive tract, the genitourinary tract. And so I think that this is a really important time to consider how we are supporting our adrenal glands, because all we have to do is wake up in the morning to start crossing paths with stressors. And I think that adrenal support can be such a helpful way. Another way, the herbal action of adrenal support is called adaptogens. Can be such a helpful way to help us become more resilient, to move through the stress in a more graceful way and recover from it more quickly. Borage is a great adrenal supportive plant. Other examples of great adrenal supportive plants include tulsi or holy basil, licorice root, devil's club, ginseng and eleuthero, rhodiola, schisandra. There's a lot of different adrenal supportive plants out there. And if this is something that's really calling out to you, and you want to have something like that, but you just aren't feeling confident enough to do it yourself, you can absolutely reach out to me. We can have a conversation and I can help guide you, get you on a good herbal support formula. I want to go back to the name borage, or borrego as it is referred to in Latin. So it's an interesting, there's two different theories about where this name originated from. So burra, B-U-U-R, burra, means furry, fuzzy, which is sort of the nature or the characteristics of the leaves. Often when there's Latin naming of plants, if you look deep enough, there's usually a story behind it. And actually both the plants we're going to talk about today have cool stories behind them. So that's the practical origin. But let's think about this again. Borage, borage. What is a word that rhymes with borage? Anybody? Yes, Leah. Courage. Oh yes, I love porridge. Yes, it also rhymes with porridge. But it's courage. And cor, C-O-R, is the root word for heart in Latin. One example is cor pulmonale, is a medical term in conventional medicine that refers to a heart-related condition connected with hypertension relating to the lungs. I am 99% sure that I haven't actually thought about that term in a while. But cor is in the reference to the cardiovascular system. And so courage also has that root word in it. that it's from the heart. It shows it right there. That courage can't be present unless there's heart-centered feelings and centeredness from the heart. And I think it's just such an important time to really embrace that concept of courage. My simplest definition of courage is when you are able to do something that scares you and you do it anyways. And I've thought about this, like talking, I tell my 2-year-old son about courage often, and I have to think about the caveat that is like, it's not like just foolish action and behavior. Like, there are some things that are scary for a reason, and we need to respect that and recognize how to discern that sort of fear versus more of this internal fear of us holding back because of our own personal fears and emotions and stories we're telling ourselves and traumas and messages that we grew up with. And how do we begin to confront those, even though they may feel scary, but to choose to confront them anyways, in the spirit of courage? And I think about this so much today and this week, of the courage it has taken to get out in the streets and protest, especially people of color, knowing that they're putting their lives in danger, simply just being outside right now. The courage of people coming together despite the fear of COVID-19. The fear of people wanting to talk or fearing to talk about race, and acknowledging that there's things like white privilege, and acknowledging that statements like Black Lives Matter are really important. Because in order to do that, a lot of us are grappling with having to face our own internal fears and hesitations, fears of retribution, fears of rejection, fears of not getting it right. And those are all valid. And I think that it's important that we start acknowledging those and addressing those, because if they don't, that is going to be an obstacle to cure. You know, as a naturopathic doctor, there are different principles in naturopathic medicine that help guide us in how we practice medicine. I need to put this down and have you guys face the sky so I can take my jacket off for a moment. It is getting warm out here. So one principle of naturopathic medicine is treating the cause rather than the symptoms. And I think that like something, you know, the plant medicine of borage can really help in those sort of areas. There's many different ways to take this medicine. And again, this is a limited use medicine if you're taking it as tincture or tea, though acknowledging that it's incredibly therapeutic, but just taking it short term, needing it, utilizing it when it's needed for the indications in the pictures, and also per recommendation of your trained or certified naturopathic doctor or herbalist, and also just using a low dose. So that includes a tincture of it, which is typically a liquid extract using an alcohol such as vodka or brandy to take and extract the medicinal constituents out of the plant and putting it into the liquid itself. You could do a tea. And typically tinctures are going to be a much more potent medicine, a lot more concentrated in the medicinal constituents, whereas a tea is a much more gentle, low dose medicine. And it's a lot easier to regulate just how much. Like say you can do, I'm seeing a question, do you make your teas with dried or fresh herb? Unfortunately, borage is not one that dries and maintains and holds the constituents of the medicine so well. So it's typically better to do fresh. And borage grows incredibly generously and with strength and vitality. That one is very prolific in the 21 acres garden that I recall from the last couple of years. And those plants can grow up to 1 to 3 feet high. You can do dried, and just knowing that it may not be as strong as it or as effective, which in this case might actually just be another safety measure for making sure that you're not getting too much of the plant. An example of a dose would be 1 to 3 drops. So that's not a whole dropper full. It's 1, 2, 3 drops. Very low dose. And doing that 1 to 3 times a day. Otherwise, doing like a couple teaspoons of the dried leaf and 1 to 2 cups of water once to twice a day. But another type of form of medicine that I really love for borage is the flower essence. I've mentioned flower essences a little bit, and I really want to highlight them today because, when it comes to taking the physical plant, it's going to help with more of the frank physical uses and indications of borage, which I will get to after we talk about flower essences a bit. But flower essences do a great job at helping lift up some of these more energetic properties of the plant. It's by no coincidence that borage was named after courage. There's a reason for these things. And that is very much shown and demonstrated in the flower essence of the plant. I have my flower essence book here with some notes, and I just want to read you a couple excerpts of the description of the borage. So when thinking about flower essence, you want to think about these pictures of what are the imbalances and what are we looking to reclaim as balance in that person's therapeutic goal. So some patterns of imbalance where people may need borage include heavy-heartedness, lack of confidence in facing difficult circumstances. It could also look like someone who's behaving in a self-centered sort of way, holding rigid thoughts or ideas, being focused on sorrow and bitterness and blame, which can often lead to an experience of feeling depressed or melancholy or apathetic, or where one just simply freezes and can't. And this is a powerful plant to help eradicate some of that balance and find a state of balance again. So what borage does is that it's actually known energetically as an excellent heart remedy, especially for the feeling of heaviness in the heart and perhaps throughout the body. At times when the soul experiences too much grief, sadness, or other adversity, the heart can become contracted and heavy. We call this feeling discouraged or disheartened. The soul needs to learn that it can counterbalance this fettered feeling in the heart by contacting that which is light or uplifting. Thus, the soul quality of courage is not so much connected to grit or strength, which tend to be more masculine qualities, but to a condition of buoyancy in the soul, or another way to think about it is resilience, which helps it to rise above rather than sink it into the weight of discouragement or depression. Borage flower essence helps the heart to experience the lightness, filling the soul with fresh forces of optimism and enthusiasm. And I also just wanted to bring up too that I don't think they're speaking necessarily of spiritually bypassing these difficult emotions. I don't think that it's that at all. I think it's about embracing and acknowledging the fear and the disheartedness. And I think borage helps give us the oomph that lifting up to be courageous and face it. I mean, think about the last time you felt brave. I was watching some music videos with my son recently. I like to watch Tiny Desk concerts with him occasionally. I'm not like a big screen advocate, but we're like, he's only experiencing a little bit, especially in quarantine. So I'm really trying to open his eyes to like culture and diversity. And we were watching Tank and the Bangas Tiny Desk concert. And if you haven't seen that one, I highly recommend it. I remember the first time I watched it, I think like most of the time I was just like this as I was watching them sing and perform. Like, it was just so theatrical and beautiful. And the last song they do is about roller coasters, and they were speaking about like when was the last time you felt brave, and like you did something that scared the hell out of you, but you did it anyways. And like, how did you feel after like coming off that roller coaster? You just felt so empowered. Like, she actually compared it to the feeling of falling in love, which is also an incredibly brave and courageous thing to do. And I think about that I think the practice of being courageous can help us uplift ourselves. I've been thinking about it a lot in the form of fire analogies, because my past life, my career historically has been a wildland firefighter. I fought wildland fires 6 fire seasons in a row. And I learned a lot about fire behavior, and I equate fire to passion in a lot of ways, because so much fire is coming out now. I mean, it's raging, and there's catastrophic fires that are just decimating forests. There's really productive prescription burns going on that are these fires that have intention and a plan and is there to benefit the health of the forest. And then there's like all these other spot fires going on that we're trying to focus on all these little spot fires and forget that there's like a huge catastrophic fire raging behind us. And we don't have no sense of our escape route. We have no sense of our safety zone. And if we have a lookout, we sure are not in communication with the lookout, and we probably need to be. But I think about using that fire and cultivating that fire as a tool versus a weapon, and how does one begin to alchemize that fear or that catastrophic fire into something productive, something of the heart, that is of courage, and that we are able to alchemize a lot of these very challenging things coming up right now into healing and productive actions and conversations and questioning and listening that's going on. So I couldn't think of a better plant to ally right now, except for maybe the second one I'm going to talk about as well today. Some of the more, and I want to just read one affirmation in reference to the borage flower essence, and this is credit to Tree Frog Farm, which is a local flower essence company that's located on Lummi Island. Diana Pepper's the owner of it. It's a very small family-owned operated business, and she's a beautiful medicine woman who makes beautiful medicines that I have used with many patients as well as for myself and my family. Tree Frog Farm. And her affirmation in regards to borage is, I am alchemy of transforming sorrow and depression into caring, conscious speech. I couldn't think of a more appropriate affirmation to have right now. So let's chat about some of the more physical uses. First of all, let's talk about the seeds. So the seeds of borage flower, borage seed oil, is actually a common oil found on the market. Oh, I'm going to repeat the affirmation one more time, and then we'll talk about the essential fatty acids of borage. So again, this is from Diana Pepper in Tree Frog Farm. I am alchemy of transforming sorrow and depression into caring, conscious speech. So the seeds of the borage have this essential fatty acid called GLA, or gamma linolenic acid, which is essential fatty acid that is anti-inflammatory in its properties, very similar to like how fish oil is anti-inflammatory, a different essential fatty acid, but similar characteristics. And it helps kind of lower or dampen the inflammatory actions and responses of these fatty acids in our bodies called prostaglandins, which are an inflammatory related fat that our bodies can synthesize and release in times of inflammation. So the borage seed oil can be really great at helping not only nourish someone who is in a depleted state, but help counter any excess inflammation that's going on. I talked about how it's supportive and nourishing for the adrenal glands and that stress response. It's also great for the nervous system in that it can be a very calming and cooling plant to really inflamed and overreactive nerves, which I think all of us could probably benefit from some of that medicine right now. And again, thinking about this overall quality of it, having it being a cooling, moist plant. So you think about what conditions could really benefit from being cooled down and wetted down. I mean, it's essentially fighting the fires in our bodies. Another example is in the respiratory tract or the respiratory system. It can be really great for that really dry, inflamed coughing related to asthma, upper respiratory tract infections, any sort of bronchitis where there's a dry, painful cough. The constituents and the energetics of that plant can be really helpful. Same with the digestive tract, you know, when there's any like pain, inflammation, irritation, borage can come in and help soothe it, like the heartburn, any ulceration. This one's more helpful for palliating and calming down symptoms. Of course, it doesn't heal unless you're addressing the underlying cause of why a lot of those conditions are there in the first place. I can't do this talk without throwing in that as a naturopathic doctor. It's really great for the skin, also with anything that is red, inflamed, infected, and it's great used topically. You could just use, you could do a spit poultice of it. Those aren't the funnest leaves to like bite into when they're raw because they do have those hairs. Although when you do bite into it, it's got that cooling mucilaginous texture to it. You could also make a tea or some sort of liquid extract and use that as an herbal skin wash. It's great for helping with a lot of female related dryness and irritation. So you think about conditions with menopause, hot flashes. It's really supportive for postpartum, helping with milk production for women, as well as that just postpartum depletion and exhaustion. I mean, having a baby is no small work. That is a frank trauma to the body. And so, you know, bathing oneself literally in something like borage, which might be the safe way to do it initially, especially if, you know, breastfeeding a newborn, creating an herbal bath with it could be a great place to start in helping healing of the tissues related to the genitourinary tract and reproductive tract. Also, the borage has calcium, potassium, iron, zinc, B vitamins, and vitamin C found within it. Any questions coming up? I saw a couple come up, but I was not able to catch them in time. Okay.
So Sarah Sue, it looks like somebody's wondering if it's good as an infused oil. And then,
Oh, yeah.
mhm.
I don't
And then
have
is there a brand that you recommend for skin conditions?
I have not had experience with borage essential oil, so I can't answer that question. And I don't know any products specifically off the top of my head that include borage. You know, borage is often one that's a little overlooked when in the plant medicine realm. I don't know if we even learned about it in our curriculum at Bastyr University. This has been a self-guided learning for me because I have just fallen in love with it. And there is a lot of information out there. I mean, there's only so many plants one can teach and learn about in school. And those are the ones that showed up on the board exams. Therefore, those are the ones we learned about. But honestly, I would recommend, you know, working on cultivating it or connecting with someone that does cultivate it and sell it. Look at your local herbal medicine stores. Up in Bellingham here, there's Living Earth Herbs, and then Tree Frog Farm with the flower essence. But, you know, looking locally at the, you know, the herbalist stores in the Seattle area, and, you know, most of them are taking orders online too. It's a great way to support these businesses right now with it. Or
Can you
simply
make
just
an
start to grow your own.
infused oil? I seem to,
Oh,
all the borage flowers are so popular with the hot restaurants in Seattle that, salad dressings and things, but we have somebody asking if you can make an infused oil.
right, where you're putting the plants in an oil and letting the oils infuse it.
Mhm.
I love that idea. I have no idea. I haven't had experience with it. But it doesn't mean there are not possibilities, and that is like a great idea. Especially topically, like that would be a great way to create a preparation where you can use that borage topically, or just even simply in drop doses and, you know, working with the energetics of that medicine. You don't necessarily need to take a flower essence to work with the energies of a plant. You know, one of my teachers, Dr. Deborah Francis, taught me that sometimes even just calling in the spirit of the plant can be enough to cultivate and work with that plant medicine. But I love the creativity coming out in these questions.
Was that teacher at Bastyr?
You know, she has taught at Bastyr. She was at the Portland School for Natural Medicine, the Naturopathic Medical School down there. She is currently, she doesn't teach anymore. She's been a little off the grid, but I do believe that she is doing. She does have a website that keeps people updated on, like, she's the one that wrote the book that I've referenced multiple times, and I'm not certain. I know she continues to teach workshops locally. She's located down in Southern Oregon. But if you just Google Dr. Deborah Francis, I'm sure you'll be able to come across her website. And the book is, let's move on to our next plant. So we have a patch of it here with grass intermingled in with it. Let me take a leaf close up. All those tiny little feathery leaflets here. Yarrow, yes. And the Latin name of yarrow is Achillea millefolium. So you guys have heard of millipedes, which is like in reference to what looks like millions of little legs. Well, millefolium is in reference to what looks like millions of little leaflets on the yarrow. And they're just starting to open up. Here's one down here that looks like the first bloomer of this area. And so this is an umbrella type shape formation of the yarrow with its what looks like a million little leaves on one leaf stalk. And then each one of these flowers has 5 little white petals on it. And I am going to just do a little scratch and sniff, or I guess rub and sniff. If you just gently rub a plant, you can help release some of the volatile oils to get a good smell, kind of like how you would do for peppermint or lemon balm. These ones actually don't smell that strong, which I'm not really surprised about. I find that the ones that are more aromatic tend to be found more out in the wild versus cultivated in these garden beds where the resources are a lot more abundant. I kind of mentioned this last time, you know, plants put out primary constituents like that for like feeding themselves, their food essentially. And then there's the secondary constituents, which we usually are thinking about for the herbal medicine of the plants. And yarrow has a lot of healing medicinal constituents to it, including one that's actually found in chamomile as well. It's called azulene. Azul. If you actually distill it out, it's a blue colored essential oil that has pretty potent anti-inflammatory properties. So that can give you insight to one of the physical properties of yarrow being anti-inflammatory. Let's see. I'm gonna just turn this around so you guys can look some more at the yarrow, since there's so many to choose from. Oh, and make sure I don't step on any thistle around me. There we go. We've got our barricade or army of yarrow here. And going back to that Latin name, Achillea. So this is named after the Greek god Achilles. And Achilles' tale is essentially about him being a warrior, helping heal his wounded soldiers, and then he endures a wound himself in the Achilles tendon, which is unable to heal. And this medicine takes that folklore story, and the naming of it speaks a lot into the medicine of yarrow. On the physical level, it's great for healing, at least helping with the acute injury and helping get to the next stage and step of healing that the bodies require. It's a great first aid herb. It helps stop bleeding. That was actually one of the first actions I learned about with yarrow when I was on a fire with this other wonderful woman who was an herbalist. I remember her teaching me about that when we were just like staging and waiting for our mission for the day. We were just taking a look at all the mountain wildflowers, and she taught me about yarrow and how you can powder up the leaves, or the flower top, and put it right on a bleeding wound, and it'll help stop the bleeding. I've used it as such as for an external wound care. You can do the spit poultice of it. And so let me just demonstrate how you do spit poultice. Let me just get I'll get a leaf of the yarrow here. So here's the leaf. Just stick it in your mouth to chew it up. Turn it into a green paste. And when you bite down on the leaf, you're breaking those cell walls and helping to release that medicine. And then you get this nice gooey poultice. And you can put that right over the wound. Bandage it up. You can do it with gauze, tape, a Band-Aid, a piece of cloth, maybe a long leaf like plantain leaf if you don't have anything else. It can help stop internal bleeding. You know, yarrow taken in high enough doses is almost effective enough to stop a menstrual flow. It can be really powerful in its effect. It's also very anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial, which are two things. You know, the antimicrobial is really important when there's an acute injury or wound, because we want to make sure that wound is cleaned out and free of microbes, bacteria, viruses, fungi. that doesn't sneak in and create infection or abscess or sepsis. So yarrow can be really effective at that first line of defense. And then it also helps modulate that inflammation response so that it's not an overreaction, an over-inflammatory response, which is can sometimes be almost as painful as the injury itself. Yarrow, taken internally, has an affinity for the pelvic and the lower, that pelvis region. So really helpful with, a lot of reproductive, female reproductive, male reproductive, as well as genitourinary conditions that require those sort of actions as well. What else about yarrow? It's a great one to put if you want to make, a healing bath. I talked about plantain leaf a month ago. Plantain and yarrow is a great combination, along with that calendula flower that I showed at the beginning, which I'm not going to get into too much today, but that's a great trio to create like a healing water infusion to put as like a sitz bath, or just in a bath soak, or to soak and saturate like a gauze pad to put over a wound if you don't want to do the spit poultice. There's less crude ways to utilize the yarrow medicine topically as well as internally. It's very bitter. It's an incredibly bitter taste, especially the ones out in the wild. And that bitter taste is really great for activating the rest and digest response in our body and activating the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system response. Tasting bitters helps stimulate that rhythmic, organized contraction of our digestive tract, peristalsis. It's also helpful at releasing digestive enzymes and bile flow. Bitters are such a great medicine. Just the simplicity of the taste of a bitter plant has a lot of medicinal benefits to it. And this week, I have been just kind of keeping my eyes out on some inspiration for this talk this week. I was, my vulnerability here, I was feeling really nervous with leading up to this talk because this is such a big time, and I didn't want to let this opportunity pass with imparting some of the plant medicine that can help us and support us right now to be the best version of ourselves, the most courageous versions of ourselves. And yarrow really spoke out to me. It's flowering here in the garden. It was physically presenting itself along with the borage. And then I was just reminded of its medicine even more with a woman I follow on Instagram. Her name is Karen M. Rose. I think she goes by Empress Karen Rose on Instagram. And she is this beautiful woman who is a woman of color in New York. I want to say the Bronx. And she had this really wonderful video this week of making a healing herbal bath during these times. She's in Brooklyn. Thank you. Yes. Check her out. Find her on Instagram, Google her, find her website. This woman has so much to teach. She teaches not only about herbal medicine making, and about the plants, but she also teaches about herbal medicine and astrology. This woman is filled with so much. I mean, I've been following her for quite a while, and I love listening to her. And she was speaking about yarrow, and she was able to take it a step further than my own current awareness of yarrow, because I know that yarrow, based on its name and its history and folklore, Achilles, who is the warrior and he is the healer as well. This is a medicine for wounded healers. And she took it a step further to really identify that this plant is here to help heal wounds of us warriors. Not only the external wounds, like I spoke about, but also healing the internal wounds within ourselves. And when I think about internal wounds, I think about the traumas that we've endured, the messages that we've endured, the hostile workplaces or environments, or even family homes that we have been in, where we've been too scared to speak up for ourselves or for others. And that this medicine combined with borage might just be the medicine that we need in these times right now. I'm going to open up my flower essence book again, and I'll just give you guys a snap or show you what this book is that I'm working with. There's a lot of other ones out there too, but this is what I have in my library. It's the Flower Essence Repertory by Patricia Kaminsky and Richard Katz. And I like it because I focus more on the Western herbs. So let's open up Yarrow and see what they have to say. Okay. So again, I want to talk about the patterns of imbalance for someone who would need the Yarrow energetic flower essence. So what it looks like is extreme vulnerability to others and to the environment. Someone that's easily depleted, overly absorbent of negative influences, and psychic toxicity. Another way to look at it that I kind of collected the content from this book as well as from Tree Frog Farm, but weak around the edges, in need of boundaries and protection, and dealing with wounds that are both inner or outer. And I think when it comes to Yarrow, this is a great medicine for people who really need protection, who don't necessarily have a lot of it. There are certain individuals out there, with the caveat before I say this, I think we all are sensitive. And some of us just are more aware of it. We have less armor on, or maybe we have more on because we're so sensitive. And I do think that there are certain people and constitutions and archetypes out there that are super sensitive. And Yarrow can be a great medicine for those, because often, being a super sensitive, it's hard to take in what's going on in the world because it can feel like too much. But I feel like this is a really important time, even for us super sensitives, to keep our ears open and our eyes open and be paying attention in our circles and in our families, in order for us to listen to the truth as well as speak our truth and stand up for those who maybe don't have a voice as much as we have the privilege to have. And Yarrow can be a really great medicine to help with the protection and the boundaries of that. There's energetic boundaries, but there's also the boundaries that we can set for ourselves verbally, being able to say no, or being able to even just question or ask, explain more, tell me more, I don't understand, or that type of language is not welcome here. And I think the important thing with boundaries is that when setting them, they tend to be more powerful when we can just state what we want or what we don't want. They seem to lose the power and the concentration when we start to try to make excuses for why we need it or trying to make a case for it. In a lot of ways that we seem to dilute the power of that boundary. So how can we learn to stand in our power and feel protected with the medicine from the Yarrow, of the wounded healer, protection from the medicine of the borage with courage and being heart-centered, to be able to show up and be the best versions of ourselves and be an agent for change and for the evolution of our world and our society, the collective consciousness, that maybe at some point, we are able to take a stand. Any questions? If you're interested in hearing more about boundaries, I'm going to do a shout out to one more beautiful woman of color, Alicia Keys. I've just been falling in love with her for the last couple of months with the release of her new book, a conversation that she has had with some other amazing women, including Oprah and Brene Brown. I just have so much love and respect for this woman, especially as a fellow mother. Ugh. And her new song, Underdog, if you have not listened to it and watched the video, please do. Be prepared to cry because it's so good. But she's got this great video on YouTube that I stumbled across last night when I was looking for a video to do yoga to after my son went to bed. And it's 4 or 5 minutes long. And she's speaking about boundaries and what that looks like, especially as a woman, especially as a mother, as a female, a woman in business, which is often a very masculine sort of culture where we push. And I wouldn't say masculine in the healthy way. This is definitely more of the toxic masculine or the patriarchal aspects, which is not healthy masculine at all. But check it out, just going on YouTube, Alicia Keys, Boundaries. I'm sure it'll come up first thing. But she does a beautiful job of reading an excerpt from her book, as well as just sharing some of her own personal stories with how she has learned to identify where she needs boundaries and how to set them in a beautiful and loving way, because we do not need to be hardened when we do this. This is the work. How can we be heart-centered and still be able to stand up for ourselves, where we're not glaring our teeth, we're like, have our claws like out and making ourselves look big and scary. Because clearly we have had enough of an experiment in society that doesn't work. And we need to start embracing these more heart-centered, soft ways where we can stand in our power and not have to scare and use scare tactics or intimidation.
Sarah Sue?
Yeah.
We've got one more question. Is
okay.
asking if yarrow spray is a spray of yarrow is enough for protection purposes, or do you need to take a tea or tincture? So if you're not fighting an ailment but wanting to be proactive, what do you recommend?
Right. Yeah, spraying is a really great way. There's hydrosols of it. There's the spray flower essences that are present, but then also just doing like drop doses, these really small doses of the herb. Tincture wise, just using a drop of it, or the flower essence, a couple drops of it. If you're making a tea, you can do an herbal preparation of yarrow and just add, just like half a cup to your, 32-ounce water bottle. And so that you're just continuing to keep that low dose and that energetic aspect of the yarrow in your body throughout the day. Maybe you're not taking it internally at all. Maybe you harvest some yarrow and dry it and you put it in a little pouch or a locket, or just stick it in your pocket, or, in your bra if you wear bras, next to your heart. The possibilities are endless. Like, what does your spirit feel called to do? And maybe it just varies depending on the day. Maybe like there's just some days we're just so incredibly worn down. The thought of like even preparing a tea just seems like too much. So maybe we just need to call in the medicine of the yarrow.
I love you, Sarah Sue. You're wonderful. Oh my gosh. So yes, so lovely.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for your participation and feedback today and for showing up. I know this is a big time, and our energy and focus is being called to all these different areas. And thank goodness this thing will be recorded, and hopefully people can have access and watch it later while they're out there just doing the big fight or the big listening and the big internal reflection right now. I love you all. Thank you for joining.
We love you too. Thank you, everybody. We're grateful to have you as part of this. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.